All right, Basil's Michael and Matt Schlapp are back with me. Matt, Marco, for example, I mean, he's trying to catch this momentum. Why isn't he going after Donald? We saw Cruz do that pretty effectively in Iowa.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I think that Marco Rubio and Donald Trump are occupying much the same space. They both do better with moderates than Ted Cruz does. So I think, Trish, you asked a great question. He should be going after Trump and those Trump supporters. But the tricky thing with Trump is many of these candidates have made the mistake of taking Trump on. And the mistake with that is, especially when they belittle him, is they're attacking his supporters. That's a lot of supporters. That's a third of they ought to be grabbing those supporters, and that's what they need to focus on.
Now, that's a very interesting point because you don't want to alienate any of them. As we heard Carl Rose say earlier, a lot of these voters in New Hampshire, they may be leaning one way, but they're not going to make up their mind until the final last minute, quite a big percentage of them. Basil, who do you think is going to take New Hampshire, and how much does this matter as we move forward to South Carolina?
You know, I think it's interesting. I actually do think Ted Cruz will take New Hampshire as they go to South Carolina.
What? Number one? You think Ted Cruz is going to actually win this?
Here's the thing. I've always felt that Ted Cruz was Donald Trump light plus electability. That's what I've always thought. So I think voters, and what's interesting is he wins Iowa, but nobody's talking about the fact that he's a Latino that won Iowa.
We talked about this before. I mean, there's such a big evangelical religious community in Iowa, one that doesn't exist in New Hampshire.
That's true.
So it's a very different state.
That's true, but I do think momentum matters, number one, and I do think that, you know, when you look at someone like a Marco Rubio, when you look at Christie, who I think is going to eat into everybody else's lead, I think Cruz is probably the one that has the most, that sort of has the biggest territory, has the biggest political geography there. But which goes to the point. I do think it's interesting to see what happens with Christie, because this is where he has to.
Well, and he's got the Union Leader. That's the only statewide newspaper in New Hampshire backing him. They came out and endorsed him, but it hasn't really translated to a whole lot, Matt. I mean, he's still trailing in the polls. Kasich, another one whose name we heard a lot about going into this, he's not doing so well. Bush needs some kind of showing if he's going to hang in there. How much is New Hampshire potentially, Matt, going to change this race?
Well, look, here's the thing. Eventually, you have to start winning states if you're going to stay in this race. And everyone's trying to figure out how many tickets are there out of New Hampshire. If you finish 4th, 5th, 6th, how many times do you get on those donor calls and say, look, I did better. I was 8 in Iowa. I'm 6 in New Hampshire. Maybe one day I'll get to 4. Eventually, donors say, look, you got to come in first. It's about getting the nomination. So
what happens to Carly with that in mind? I mean, Carly Fiorina, she's not going to be on the debate stage this weekend.
I think she should be on the debate stage this weekend. I think she actually has the case to make that she does have a unique voice, and it's a unique voice that's got to be a part of this nominating process.
No, wait. You're talking about, like, effectively affirmative action? We've got to put her on. She's got a unique voice because she's the oldest woman out there?
No, hold on, wait.
Republicans talking about affirmative action?
Wait. Look at the polls. Actually, look at the polls, and Carl said this, my old boss. If you actually look at many of the polls they're using to make these decisions, these polls are actually very inaccurate, and I think you're going to see once again Carly actually has a delegate, and she has a voice, and I think we're making a big mistake when we cut her out of these
You got to have some way of measuring this, and they do look at a lot of polls. It's not like it's one single poll.
They do.
Anyway.